Whatever you hope to find, it's a pretty good use of your time. Let's learn and talk about things like squirrels and satin strings. You might think we're bananas. It's the Biggie, Kelly, and your Nana show. All right, welcome to the Biggie, Kelly, and Nana show. And today, what are we going to talk about? I think it was moral reasoning and spirituality.
Yep. You're looking at me.
I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you because you're the one that talks about all the temporal space and like the energy that flows between nature and God and humanity.
Yes, for which I get made fun of by Callie for that.
Hey, I don't want to joke on it. Maybe it's just I don't get it.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I get spirituality. You're right. You know, and
well, to me, there is no difference.
Spirituality to me. That's a good place to start. Why don't we just define what spirituality is to us?
Okay.
And I know we got different perspectives. We got like Christian, Buddhist, and agnostic. So did I label correctly?
I think that I have no label.
Yeah, I guess we kind of come to that conclusion before.
Yeah.
You're like kind of a hybrid of a mishmash of a whole bunch of different religions that works for you.
Well, yeah,
but that's not a bad thing.
Well, depending upon who you speak to, because some people think that you're not supposed to cherry pick. You know, that cherry picking is bad. But then they say everything is bad. That's the problem with believing what other people say. How the fuck are they right? How do we know they're right about anything?
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier was with religion. A lot of it, especially the Abrahamic religions, it's what God says. It's not, man just transcribed what God's told him to write.
And then they think that they have the authority to interpret that for you.
Yeah, even though the reality is a God that is that powerful, you'd be really hard pressed to interpret that.
Right.
I could not dumb something down to the point where an ant could understand my language.
Yeah.
I think that a good way to go about it would be to each person describe their viewpoints in a quick summary, like, because somebody might not know what Buddhism is, or everybody's going to know what Christianity is. If it's listening to this podcast, I'd say.
Well, not everybody will.
Not every single person. But, and then, so describe what your viewpoints are, like the basic tenets, and then how you came to that belief.
Oh, that's a good.
Yep.
That's a lot.
It's
right,
a lot.
but that's why I'm saying summarize it, because we could get off on tangents and be on that for an hour and a half. So we'll...
And differentiate between... My hands are blue because of my jeans. Ew.
What?
I'm dying. My hands are blue. Anyway, I had an ADD moment, or ADHD moment.
Squirrel.
Differentiate between the religious aspect and the spiritual aspect.
How do you define your religion and your spirituality and what brought you to it? Let's just kind of keep it there. And what are the core tenets of your particular brand of Nanaism?
Nanaism? It is a Nanaism.
It is a Nanaism.
So, I will have to start with I was not raised in a household with religion at all. My mom was raised very strict Christian, not unlike the snake handler people.
Oh, like Pentecostal?
Not unlike that. She almost died when she was at 10 years old from measles because they didn't believe in going to a doctor. Mm-hmm. So she raised me like, she turned completely against it. And she was like, you figure this stuff out for yourself. I love you no matter what. She's that type of person. So I rejected everything that came my way because I see through bullshit. I don't like bullshit. I don't like people fucking with my head. And we live in a very Bible belty area. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at stuff like Eckhart Tolle,
who's kind of vague spiritualism.
I would say that was the first thing that resonated with me, is just the way he intellectualized the way I felt. I'm like, okay, I connect with that. I did not connect with a man in a sky, or you telling me who I needed to be, that I'm not supposed to have premarital sex, or that I'm going to hell if I make this, and this decision. I didn't connect with that. So anyway, intrinsically, internally, I connected with Eckhart Tolle. I would say that was the beginning of it.
And Eckhart Tolle is he's probably ultimately more heavily influenced by Buddhism.
Absolutely.
Some like Hindu and some Christianity. But from what I've read on Eckhart Tolle, and I've read a couple of his books, and I've listened to one of his books on tape, it definitely has more of a Buddhist vibe.
Yeah, it's that the idea that you don't have to suffer.
That makes sense.
Or you could, or there's a reason for suffering.
There's a reason. Yeah. You have to suffer.
Yeah, you have to suffer, but there's understanding, there's growth from it. But he strips away all the bullshit of suffering, the things that we put upon ourselves, like being jealous of someone, or being attachment to, which is very Buddhist, right? Mm-hmm. Like he tells a story about a woman who is dying, and she's just obsessively talking about how she believes that her maid stole her ring. How could she steal this ring? I'm dying, for God's sake. I was going to pass this on as an heirloom, blah, 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 blah. And, Eckhart told her something like, well, what does it really matter at this point? And kind of really helped her process what matters and what doesn't. I'm like,
well,
that's right.
Do you believe in God?
I do believe in God. So I have always sort of believed in God, but I don't think I see God as a man in the sky, like this authority figure.
We've proven that can't be true.
Right, but
we've
but
sent
that's the
spaceships
idea.
out into space. We know there's no men in clouds with harps and wings. That's a very childlike interpretation, right?
Yeah, but that is the idea. I feel that Christianity tries to beat into your head, is that there's a parental like figure up there, or somewhere watching you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like Santa Claus. I'm watching you.
So it's kind of like, to me, it sounds almost like deism. Like there's a God that set the wheels in motion, and then he stepped back.
That is a possibility I entertained too for a very long time as well. That, why would he be interfering with us? Why do I, and I would see people like pray for stupid shit, like pray that their car starts, or that they get a check in the mail, or
they joked.
Like, why are they bothering God with that?
They joked on that in that movie Bruce Almighty. Remember, he was getting so many prayers, and so many of them were.
He said, "I got to prioritize these."
Yeah, so many of these prayers were BS, selfish, or just mundane, and so he just got tired of it. So he just said yes to all.
Yeah.
And the havoc. I won the lottery. Oh, me too. I mean, so did everyone else. So it was like $1.
But fast forward to later, I did circle back around to Christianity because, one, I don't know if I completely believe in, that Jesus existed, and like you said previously, in a zombie-like Jesus, resurrection.
I have trouble.
Kind of
that is what keeps me from. I can believe that there may be a God. I know it's not my turn. I'm speaking out of turn.
Okay.
I know I can believe that there may be a God because, like we've talked about before, I believe in a possibility of a multiverse, and different dimensional space could have different things that I just cannot fathom and nor perceive in my little 3-dimensional world. Maybe this contradicts that last statement, but I just can't believe in zombie Jesus. I believe historically Jesus was probably true. He probably really existed. And in Rome crucified people all day long. And he probably existed. And because the thing is, people wouldn't have died for that guy if it was just a concept. I don't think so.
Well, you've got a point there, but I think.
And I'm talking about the apostles.
Yeah, you're talking about after he
that actually gave their life. People who would have known him gave their life.
Yeah, I got you.
For his ideals and his principles. I don't think they would have done that if they had just been 12 dudes that came together and came up with some shit on their own.
Right.
It's like, hey, I got a good idea. Well, so do I. All right, let's put this all together and let's kill ourselves over it.
Right.
Yeah, it's probably not. I mean, maybe they did it with Dave Koresh, right? But Dave Koresh was a real person.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and I've thought about that too. Jesus could have been real. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Do I believe that he rose from the dead 3 days later? I can't.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about all the miracles that took place because they're not. We don't have much evidence that miracles take place now, so that
Well, yeah, I guess
me
the
a bit.
argument is that miracles take place all the time. We're just blind to them, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, being alive is a miracle.
It really is. When you look at science in itself and the way the natural world operates, it's pretty freaking phenomenal.
Or how the pyramids, or like that. There's a certain organization to down to the way they calculate shapes. Have you ever looked into that, how things are shaped? It's this precise.
You mean geometry?
No, it's in nature, but it's also kind of like
I know what she's talking about. There's a number.
I hate when I can't remember what I read.
No, I know what you're talking about, and I don't know the whole theory or anything, but there's a.
Well, now I'm interested.
There's a number that repeats itself in nature.
42.
Maybe, I don't know.
That's Douglas Adams.
Let me Google it, man.
Well, there is a number that repeats itself in nature, and physicists and scientists of all different aspects trying to figure out what it is.
In physics, there really is the God theory, and that they believe there may be an equation that regulates all existence. Mm-hmm. They haven't figured it out.
That may be what
but that is like the God theory in physics is that there may and by the way, I know some of the top physicists. What's his name? Michio Kaku. He'd said that.
No, it's your boy Neil deGrasse.
It can't be the Fibonacci sequence.
He had said that.
Is it the Fibonacci sequence?
It can't be that, but it's a golden ratio. There's something else though. Divine proportion. Okay, well maybe it is. 1.618 divine proportion golden ratio.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
And actually look into that.
I watched a documentary on it years and years ago, and it is interesting. But,
yeah. Well, anything interesting, I'll read.
And that, to me, that is not. And how do you explain coconuts?
Thai coconuts or like the fuzzy kind?
Coconuts. If you're on an island and you're surrounded by salt water, you got coconuts that grow that give you exactly what you need: potassium, magnesium.
You don't think those islands exist just from before water separated them from other bodies of land?
Not with coconuts, because then you wouldn't need the coconuts to stay alive.
What the hell are you talking about?
Coconuts.
Are you talking about like God is
You can't drink the water.
There's some divine
right?
plan for the evolution of coconuts on an isolated body of land.
Right.
Because
you
it's
can't
not
drink
needed.
salt water.
It's not needed to sustain any life because there's no life that exists on that island. Right?
No. I mean, any island. Coconuts don't grow here. You know, I'm saying it. Am I wrong here about this?
I'm not sure if you're right or wrong. I'm trying to follow.
Okay. It's the exact stuff that is needed for you to stay hydrated on an island that's surrounded by salt water.
Like, it serves a purpose.
Yes. It's unexplainable. It's inexplicable.
Well, I am trying to explain it to you.
All right, well, explain it to me why it's there. Not that it had occurred, but how do you know it's needed in that space when you don't have any other water?
Well, I'm just explaining why it exists. It exists because that land was all joined together at one time, and water has just crept in between two bodies of land and created an island.
Do you really think coconuts were there first? Or was the salt water there first? Because nature needed the coconuts to be there.
I imagine the coconuts were there because...
What do you think, Biggie?
Because he's got this really confused look on his face.
Coconuts.
I didn't think this is where this podcast would go.
The evolution.
Of coconuts.
It's just an example of when an occurrence where.
I mean, I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like how does nature know that whatever is needed, and like the herbs, the medicinal herbs, and that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, we don't need to dissect the evolution of coconuts, but
my only thing on that is if you're referring to evolution, for example, you're saying that these things in coconuts are what we as current humans need in order to survive. But I'm looking at it in a different evolutional standpoint and saying, what if there were other primordial human beings that existed there that didn't develop because evolution took place, and only the ones that needed those said coconuts were the ones that lived? In other words, the coconuts drove our evolution rather than something divine giving coconuts for people.
Yeah, we evolved to need the components that the coconut provides.
Right.
Not
so
the
in
other
other
way
words,
around.
Maybe a coconut, maybe there was two humans or humanoids. One didn't need, or one needed, let's say, lithium in order to stay alive, just some random element. Coconuts didn't provide that, so that person died. Therefore, the person that existed,
for that bipolar
they didn't need
person.
lithium, so they needed the things that were in that coconut. So I look at it as an evolution in that regard.
We evolved to require a certain level of potassium
and magnesium. I would say that's probably accurate. We probably did evolve to need those.
I kind of believe a little bit of the reverse. Not that I'm against evolution, but it does take the something out of it for me. Like, I don't know, really?
The excitement of coconuts?
Yeah.
They really weren't divinely
Somebody is going to connect with my coconut theory. the
divine coconut theory.
So you think that we evolved around these things? Yeah. I kind of disagree with that. I'm going to disagree on the basis of no scientific knowledge.
If there was ever a reason to disagree,
that would be the most common.
All right.
I disagree with your science because I don't understand it. That's probably the number one reason why people disagree with science.
Well, all right, let's move on.
So what are the core tenets of your belief?
The core tenets of...
Besides coconuts.
Right, coconuts. So, that there's a purpose for things. I have a purpose. And
coconuts have a purpose.
Coconuts have a serious... They have a huge purpose. So, okay, I circle back to Christianity because of the values that I found in that book. I think it resonates with me.
Which book?
The Bible.
New Testament, right?
Old Testament and New Testament.
Oh, New and Old.
Yeah, not that I believe the things in there happen to an exact T, but
well, yeah,
there
because
is
those are
profound spiritual wisdom in the Bible.
Those are oral traditions, and if anyone knows the way information disseminates out amongst people, over time it gets really clustered, and
there's a lot in the Bible that can teach you how to live a life
there is
that's worth living.
There is a lot of wisdom in religion. That's why when people say the world would be so much better off without religion, I can't disagree anymore, because I've seen what governments run by atheism do to people, and they ain't nice. So I do not see any reason to think that removing religion would do anything to better this world.
I think God is in me. I think God is with me. I now believe that. I spent a very long time in my life feeling completely alone and lonely and scared and afraid. I don't know what we got going on.
Is there like a smoke detector going off?
Yeah, they're taking care of it though. It's not a smoke detector.
Do you need to go handle some business?
Water table. No.
Oh, they're waterboarding someone.
So, that's my belief. I don't know if I'm right, but it helps me to know that. It makes me a better person.
I think it's fair though that you said I don't know if I'm right, because Biggie had said something about that. You know, there's something about the hubris of. Same with hard atheism, right? That hubris of just saying, I know I'm right.
Yeah.
No one else. The religion of my mother is the only correct religion.
Right. Yeah.
I can give up addictive behaviors knowing that I'm not alone, or feeling that I'm not by myself, because
well, that goes a little bit.
Works.
That goes a little bit against, just to confront you. That goes a little bit against what you were saying about your change and all that growth coming from within, because now you're talking about like not being alone and having God within you, right?
Yeah. But that's inside of me. I know that there is not an invisible man hanging out with me right here. That's
But what's
internal.
the difference if he's invisible here or invisible here? I'm pointing.
That one's internal and one is external. This internal is going into your spirit, your soul, for answers, with assistance, of course, with outside help if you need it. But, you know, it's like if my counsel, like I keep my counsel myself, but with God, because I think I sound like a lunatic. I'm listening to myself and I sound like a fucking lunatic.
But hey, I think the best thing about these
people, I promise.
I think the best thing about these conversations are hearing yourself out loud, because sometimes it makes way more sense in your head than when you try to articulate them outwardly. And so you can really start to reevaluate what the hell you're thinking.
Well, no, going inside myself, what I mean by that is like prayer, meditation. You know, what I gain, the insight that I gain from those experiences.
You don't practice within a fellowship with other practitioners.
I do go to church.
Oh, you do?
But, yeah, I mean, like, hit and miss. I may join a church just because I am finding more value in community. I typically am a loner. I've been that way my whole life. So, like, but now I'm starting to see that I don't know if it's COVID or whatever, but I want to be with other people. And I've also learned that I don't have to. I can seamlessly be with somebody who's a devout Christian just as much as I can hang out with somebody who is not. I don't. That it doesn't bother me.
Maybe what it is you're just softening as you get older.
Maybe.
Because I know with me, I was definitely for many years before I started really working on myself, I was very misanthropic. You know, just people just drove me insane. I was like the Grinch on the mountain with his dog, right? Mm-hmm. Just leave me the hell alone. And as I've softened, I can do small talk now. Mm-hmm. I used to not be able to make small talk with people. Now I can make small talk. And it comes from, you know, actually just caring enough about just people in general and humanity. And so as I've gotten older, I've gotten softer. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate being around people more. So maybe it's the same with you.
It could be. I think that there's value in other people. You learn from other people. I did not value that a lot in life. I'm thankful for that in a little bit, in some ways, because I think people can put their shit on you and then you internalize it and become something you were.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, everybody knows that, right? Mm-hmm. So by staying away from that, I cultivated myself, kind of. But now I can go back and appreciate people more. I can appreciate just for who they are.
Yeah.
And not have any judgments that you believe what you believe or you believe. I don't care. As long as I know you're like a well-intended person, that's all I need to know about you.
Dennis Prager said something that I still take with me that I thought was really cool. He said, I'm not interested in how smart you are. I'm interested in how good you are. Mm-hmm. And I've been kind of reevaluating that because I've had people in my life that are brilliant, but they're just miserable human beings. Mm. They're just hedonists. They just do whatever that feels good, you know, and they take it out on other people because that's not a source of happiness. That's fleeting, right? That's just dopamine. Mm-hmm. And that goes away. You habituate to it. You build up tolerance to it, and you start to crave it. And I don't find any truth in that lifestyle. So when he said that, it stuck with me because I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for people who try to put out something good in the world. Mm-hmm. And because somebody who's trying to better other people is going to inspire you to some extent to be a better version of yourself. That makes sense, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm more, I used to just be like this. I just wanted to absorb my brain in as much like science and mathematics and philosophy, history, everything I could, just be just some towering intellect. That's all I gave a shit about. And so I was surrounded by all these brilliant assholes that, you know, only care about the same thing I did, which is, you know, their own intellectual growth. But I've realized that that's pretty superfluous. Mm-hmm. I mean, really? I mean, I'm not going to bash intellectualism. I still love to read, and I still love to learn. But at the end of the day, someone who's ladling out soup at a soup kitchen is going to be way more beneficial to humanity than somebody who sits in a chair and thinks about ways that economy can take advantage of someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it all depends on, you know, what you want. You know, do you want that, or do you want whatever depth brought a man who has one leg to, and this is a true story, to a church, but he doesn't go there to get the food. He goes there to help put the food in people's cars. Mm-hmm. What brought that man to that space in his life where he said, I want to give? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And do you want meaning in that respect, or do you want the knowledge?
With me, intellectualism, and you could be religious and good and intellectual. So you can find people.
You can have it all.
You really can have it all. And doing good, which we can talk about with moral reasoning as much as you guys want, doing good is subjective. Yeah, the road to hell's paved in good intention, right? Mm-hmm. But there are objective truths, and people that are morally good do have, I hate to use your terminology, like an energy about them that radiates out. And you can tell because it's not this miserable, morose energy that makes everyone feel angry and bitter. Mm-hmm. It makes people a little happy, a little good. And these are like enlightened people, right, that walk around and they walk out of a room and people feel a little bit better about their life and in the world. Where that's based on action, whereas intellectualism is based on idea.
Okay.
And it's theory.
Right.
Right? That's the difference between action and theory. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm just going to sit in my chair and contemplate ways that something could happen. Like, I don't know, like I talked about economic theory. Mm-hmm. I'm Karl Marx. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to think of the problems that plague humanity and wealth discrepancy, and then I'm going to come up with a possible solution to it. Mm-hmm. That's different than if Karl Marx had actually just got off his fat ass and gone to a soup kitchen and tried to actually sacrifice a little bit of himself. Mm-hmm. Which is probably why there's no truth in communism and those countries are abhorrent, right?
Right.
And because it's not based on self-sacrifice, it's based on you sacrificing, someone else sacrificing. So there's not really a good moral backbone to it. It comes across like it is, right? Because who the hell doesn't want to help poor people, right?
Right.
But ultimately, there's probably no moral truth to it because the man who wrote it had no moral truth to him. I mean, wasn't he letting his family starve to death?
I don't know.
He had a pretty hideous life. And I don't know. I've gotten to the age where I look at action as far more important than ideas. You can sit there and tell me all day long all the great things that you could do or you should do. But if you're not doing any of them, what are you really benefiting? Yourself and the world.
The best person that I ever met besides my mom is this 92-year-old woman. And she has 3 refrigerators in her house. She does not have a dryer in her home. I don't know if it's because she can't afford one. I suspect she just wants exercise. She takes her wet clothes, and she lives straight ghetto. She takes her clothes and pushes them to the laundry, and she dries them. She has a job. She works 3 days a week. What she does with those 3 refrigerators is she cooks. She cooks for everybody. Doesn't matter who it is. She just cooks for them. She lets a homeless lady, that y'all might know, sleep on her porch. She's a terrible alcoholic. She won't let her inside because the lady gets mean.
Of course, people probably would label her as codependent.
This woman is not going to die because people need her. You know what I'm saying? She might be labeled codependent. Her husband died in the 80s, you know, so she's got like a couple of kids left that she hangs out with. But my point is this woman, she wakes up every morning and she reads her Bible. She smokes a cigarette that's just like that long.
The Virginia Slim.
Yeah, and she reads her Bible on her front porch in the ghetto. Everybody knows her. And when they drive by, they beep. When kids walk by, they see her reading her Bible.
Yeah, she's a self-actualized person.
Yes, they see her.
She's enlightened.
Miss Blank I'm hungry. Oh, here you go, baby. That's what they see.
Well, you and I had a shared client years ago that when you met him for the first time, you're like, I think he might have been an angel here to test us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, I wouldn't go that far, of course, because that's you, not me. But I did think he was an enlightened person, and of course, when I told him that, he like laughed at me because he's like, "I'm here for therapy. What the hell you mean I'm enlightened?"
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I need your wisdom, man. And I'm like, you just got to listen to yourself.
That's right. That's right. But what I think about this woman is, you know, you and I have degrees, but this woman, this 92-year-old woman, yes, she's lived a long life, but she will have done more for anybody than us.
Well,
just by example.
Possibly.
Okay, that's what I would like to think.
We're not 92.
Right.
Well, I don't think it's fair to compare anyway. I think you just compare her to her, and she's putting out so much good in the world. And she probably sounds like she's an enlightened person. She's
very enlightened. I mean, she's an amazing woman, but that's what I value. She doesn't have any money. She doesn't have.
You don't need money.
The mental.
That's the problem with communism. Not to get on that a whole lot, but there's a preoccupation with wealth.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about distribution of wealth, and breaking down the individual for the collective, and that's the philosophy. The other one's the economic side. And there's a preoccupation where if we could just equalize wealth, people would be happy. There's no evidence to support that. At all. And I know Biggie had said that I'd rather be crying in a Mercedes than crying in a Pinto. and there's some truth to that too, right?
Yeah. I know I got off on a tangent about that woman,
well,
but I just completely admire her. And to me, she is so much more wealthy.
Well, we're talking about moral reasoning, right? That's kind of like at the core of what we've been talking about, even though it's very rare to see Biggie this quiet.
I'm sorry.
I see you writing stuff though.
That turned you off with
no, I'm just waiting on
my
you guys.
admiration for the
I saw
lady.
him. I saw him taking notes though, so I think we ought to just see what he's been thinking. Because obviously,
and a lot of people do pass that off like it doesn't mean shit. You know, people may not even notice that woman.
That's not what I'm saying.
No.
Oh,
I'm not projecting that off of you.
No, it
just made me think that how much people in general disregard people like her because of...
Well, she's not flashy.
Right.
And most enlightened people are not going to be flashy. That's kind of the exact opposite.
Yes.
It's total humility. Sacrifice comes from knowing that I'm just a speck in the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. And the world does not revolve around me. So they do not... You walk around... There are Buddhas that exist, and you wouldn't know it because they're not the people that you would have attention called to them.
Right. And you're lucky. Well, I feel lucky when I come across these people.
I meet so many of those people. I meet far more of those people in poverty than I do in any other social economic class. And also there's some morally abhorrent people in lower classes, but
sure.
But poverty and class are not necessarily the same thing, right?
Right.
There's a lot of components to go into lower class that outside of just money. And because that woman, even though she's got probably no money, she's probably has almost all the same values a middle class person would have.
Yeah.
Minus the wealth.
Yeah.
And but I think that it's important to what?
I was just saying a middle class. I mean that's a get I don't know. I don't want to get off on a tangent. We'll save that for another day. Looks can be
the social
deceiving.
class
just that you think that people have good upbringings and their exterior is okay, but it's not okay.
Well, people also conflate money with class too.
Yeah.
Too much. It's like, oh well, he grew up with two parents with doctorates, and he went to law school, so he's middle class. Maybe, probably, but there's a lot of criteria. I mean, statistically, probably, right? Just because what makes your social class is a bunch of domains and factors, and those values for like getting education or knowing how to manage money, not living outside your means. There's all sorts of different things that go into that. So statistically, he probably would, but not necessarily. But people in poverty, that's what we talked about. Suffering is how you grow.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I'm really not interested in just people who've been catered to them their whole life. They tend to be pretty selfish.
Well, what other frame of reference would they have? When I was in my 20s, I never talked about my past, my struggles. I actually felt like guilty, like I wasn't good enough or something, because such and such graduated college, they went on campus where I worked 2 jobs and went to school, these kinds of things. Now I'm like, I'll tell somebody in a heartbeat, I come from poverty, but that doesn't mean my mind is impoverished. I had a good mom.
I know what it's like, and I come from a staunchly middle class family, and I know what it's like to put water in shit to make it last longer.
Yeah.
There was that was a commercial on Black Jeopardy on SNL. Put some water. The company was put some water in it. Like some more soap.
Yeah.
The tomato paste, tomato soup. Put a little bit more water in it, but like that was inherently an African American thing. That's
right.
Absolutely not. That's anyone who doesn't have the money to go get more dish soap, so you put a little bit of water in it. And it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. Poverty doesn't give one iota about your race.
Right.
99% of the people who've lived in this planet have been impoverished. And so that's a false dichotomy.
Did we cover my beliefs?
I don't even know where we went.
We went off on a tangent.
I think we're probably just going to have to move over to Biggie.
Biggie, what are your beliefs about religion and spirituality and sorry.
So, well, to start this off, I'll say an agnostic, a Christian, and a Buddhist walk into a podcast studio, right?
Yeah.
So, no, I definitely fall into the agnostic field. For a long time, I felt as though I was an atheist, and the more that I heard other atheists talk, the more I recognized that they were very pompous.
I don't want to be judgmental, but there's like a lot of those hard atheists are insufferable.
Yeah. That's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're just so insufferable. I mean, they might as well
Bill
just
Maher?
Bill Maher is absolutely insufferable.
Yeah. They're painful to listen to.
And I watch.
He's funny, though.
I watch his show.
fantastic.
I watch his show, but he is insufferable because of how arrogant and pompous he is. Like,
yeah. So I recognize that those, and I didn't want to be that person. And the reason that they were so pompous, the thing that made them that way, was the surety that they had, which is what led me to that place in the first place, because I saw religion as a surety. I am so sure of this, and you're wrong, and I'm right, and that's the way it is, that I was like, okay, well, then I'll be an atheist. And they were like, we're so sure of this that all the rest of you are definitely wrong. And I said, how about none of you know anything? And we're all just human beings kind of figuring our way out as we muddle through life.
It's bad science.
It is.
Because scientists have to be able to say, I could be wrong.
Right. And admitting that ignorance seemed humble to me.
I would say science depends on you trying to prove yourself to be wrong.
Right. So in other words, I stood there and I said, do I know drastically more than anyone else? And am I sure of this on a deep philosophical level? No, I can't be too sure of anything. So the best thing to do is to be humble and admit that I'm a human being and I probably shouldn't know this. Probably not prepared to know this. Physiologically.
I used to always joke as a teenager, I would say, the only people who know whether or not there's a God or not are those who are dead.
Right. Mm-hmm. So where I don't know is where I draw that line and admitting I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't know, and what happens after we're dead is one of them, and what if anything guides daily action or changes events is unknown.
So what are the core tenets of your agnostic beliefs, especially like we're talking about Nana, with your moral reasoning and moral development?
Moral reasoning and development for me specifically comes from, I would say, honestly, I know that this is going to sound a little bit nationalist, but the core tenets of the Constitution and what America is, for me, is the way that I want to live my life. My version of religion is the Constitution, is the Bill of Rights. Now, that doesn't mean that it's laws, because there are a lot of petty laws in the book. But the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are completely different than the laws. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights push for things that we should all be a fan of. We should all promote.
But of course, that was drafted by Christians.
But with the separation of church and state in mind.
No, it's not nowhere in it. Just separation of church and state was only letters to some Baptists or some not Baptists.
I never said it was in it. I said it was drafted with that in mind. That's two different things.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was drafted to not promote one religion over another, or not to say that you have to have a religion in the first place.
Oh, yeah, because they knew that
they were trying to get away from it.
Yeah, they were fleeing religious persecution.
Exactly.
Sure.
So they wanted to make sure that religious persecution, one way or the other, wasn't in there. So, I mean, it directly...
There's a certain amount of moral truth to the live and let live, which is basically the Constitution.
Right.
It's live and let live, right? And we have kind of corrupted it over time.
Right. Now, I will say, that is where I get my philosophical right and wrong principles. A combination of that and a combination of internal feelings after you do something. So if you do something wrong, the feelings and the societal looks that you're going to receive pretty much are going to navigate that. They're going to steer you in one direction or another. I kind of, for the most part, traditionalist America, I feel if you do something wrong in society, most people will let you know. I'm not talking about police arresting you. I'm not talking about politicians or judges judging you. I'm talking about societally. So, in other words, there's a law against, and we'll go back to this, there's a law against smoking pot, but if you smoke weed, most people don't care. There, for a long time, was not a law against being gay, but you couldn't get married.
They might not care that someone randomly smokes weed. They might care if someone they loved was doing it, especially if it was at the point where it was impacting their life, right?
Right, that's true. But I'm talking about societally in general. The vast majority of people, if you're just a random guy on the street, they're not upset that you're doing that. They are upset, however, if you're out there diddling kids. That's a pretty good moral compass to go off of, a society's reaction to you child molesting versus societal reaction to you smoking some weed. You are going to get two completely different reactions from the majority of society, but they're both illegal. So that's what I'm saying when I'm saying that law doesn't always represent people's opinions. It doesn't represent public opinion in a lot of cases.
Well, I think it's very dangerous, though, for morality to be based on public opinion.
That's true, because public opinion can change.
It's always changing.
Right.
It's constantly changing, and it's been proven to always be wrong.
And it could
in hindsight.
Right, and it could be the public opinion of the Nazis in World War II.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's always right, but what I am saying is that traditionalist American, 20, 40, 50 years ago, that was a pretty good, we were heading in the right direction, and I feel that if you take that same attitude and the same old American spirit and head towards that, you can make a pretty good moral compass off that.
I would actually almost argue that.
How so?
Because while the intention of it, I would say, is good, like so many things in the road to hell, the freedom to define your own moral good is how we end up in the mess that we're in now. It's like it was almost set up the stage for the problems we have now by letting people just live the way they want to live. Does this make sense on a moral perspective?
I get that, but I don't see how the way that we're failing now in regards to how we've lived in the past 50 or 100 years and how we've structured things is definitely not a worse failure than structured religion has supplied. Structured religion, in most cases, I won't say most, but in a huge amount of cases, has led to really, really bad things. So I'm not saying that what we've got going on now, me using the Constitution as a religious or as a moral compass, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I'm not saying that it's worse than the other religions. So if I have to pick one, would I pick what we're going through now? Would I pick communism? Would I pick the Renaissance era? Or not the Renaissance, when the Crusades? All of these different things that religion has made occur.
You mean the war for land in Accra?
Yeah.
For the French nobility and English nobility?
Exactly. So I am...
well, and of course, that's the other argument. So many of these disastrous things done in religious context were actually more political in nature.
Yeah, and they were just using religion
to get the average Joe behind them.
To steer the sheep in the right direction, which is sad, but that makes me nervous when you do have something that you can use a fear-based tactic to turn someone into a monster, to turn them into either a monster or a sheep. That makes me nervous. And
well, see, if you met somebody who is living the core tenets of their religion and actually knowing that people are fundamentally imperfect, right? But they're trying, like your little old lady, to live, who's probably bases all of her decisions on what would Jesus do kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Consciously. Are you more likely to get a person who's living morally than someone who is operating on just a political moral code? Because I can only...
Well, I guess that's there's two different people there.
And by the way, a lot of political moral codes are still living off the skeleton of religion. Those core tenets, like the founding fathers, and people talk about Thomas Jefferson being an atheist. That's not true. He wasn't an atheist. He would actually be probably a fundamentalist compared to most Americans now.
Right. With
in context, he was very moderate religious in his time.
Right.
Not now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now he'd be like, who's that Southern Baptist hick? You know?
Yeah.
But so you have to, but they were basing that on the morals of Christianity. They were living off that skeleton, right? I think at this point it's impossible to say that humans can be morally good because we have 6,000 plus years of interdependence with religion and politics.
What I'm trying to get across
That's
here,
true.
what I feel is that I don't think society, like you said, society has to have religion in order to function properly.
I think it probably does.
I feel the exact opposite.
I think if we...
And I'm not saying that we need to push atheism to where no one's allowed to practice religion, but I don't see how we majorly benefit with it versus without it. Now, if you look at somewhere like some communist-controlled countries, they're collapsing not because of not having religion. They're collapsing because of all of their political problems, which is derived from the fact that they are a communist country versus America's not.
The problem that I've noticed with atheism...
I'm not for atheism, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
You're agnostic. But what I'm seeing is... And this is endemic in communist societies, is a complete... And we see it with some of our political dissents like that too. A complete lack of life. Or a disregard for the importance of life. Because you see that with, 120 million dead in communist countries? You know, stuff like abortion and stuff. Just a complete disregard for life. And so I think it's essential to have religion. Because I think people are just fundamentally self-serving.
Right. I get that.
At their core. And even with religion, you're not wrong. There's a lot of terrible religious people out there that are... But I'm still more interested in the person who's trying to not be that person than the one who is.
Yeah, I meet so many people all the time that are religious and bad people, and then people that aren't religious and are great people. And
I don't know many bad people that are actually religious. I know people who grew up with a religion, like where it's more of a culture.
Well, the Southern Baptist thing, they will hate you if you are not feeling the same. If you don't share the same values that they do, the same religion, they want to convert you, and they actively hate you. Now they'll talk about love all day. Yeah. Oh, I just love you. I just want to change you, brother.
A lot of hypocrisy. It turns you off.
But are they...
Exactly.
See, my argument would be...
That freaks me out, and I say, I'm not going to give in to your fear. That's not who I am as a person.
My argument would be...
Anybody that attacks me with fear or threatens me in any way, I'm automatically turned off in every way, shape, or form. Even if it's just one little iota of fear. Like we were saying earlier with Methodists, sure, they're a lot nicer, but at the end of the day, they still believe in hell. And they still believe if you don't follow these tenets, you're going to go to hell. And for me, if there's even any inkling of that, to where if I don't do exactly what you're telling me, I'm going to be persecuted, that makes me nervous. And I don't want that. So I want pure freedom.
Isn't that the very problem of looking outside for what you're looking for as opposed to going inside? Because you will find religion in people and how they interpret things. And they're flawed. So that's what I mean about going internal with it.
Yeah, if I was to go along with if I was going to pick a religion, it would probably be one of the internal, you decide your actions and you deal with the consequences.
I don't know very many of those religions, though, because even Buddhism, which is the most, the Buddha heart coming from within and awakening the potential within you, even with Buddhism, it is there's precepts that you follow. It's, don't drink, don't take in intoxicants, don't kill, don't lie. These don't practice sexual misconduct. There are, and what these things, the reason when you do those behaviors often and unregulated, you create terrible suffering in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that human laws political laws do a very good job of mimicking that.
Yeah. I think you hit it.
I think they tried to. I think they try to take what they deem to be good out of religion, and then they try to make it political, and which is their, right? Mm-hmm. I just don't think they do a very good job. And I think that because everything would, I guess, fall.
I guess
If you take the divine influence out, it's all superfluous.
You're utilizing religion as a tool to keep people doing a specific set of guidelines. And for that, if that was the only thing that it was used for, and good guidelines, then I would be happy with that. But literally half the time, if not more, it's used as a tool to control people. Not to control them to do good things, but to control them in political ways.
Well, and so is, of course, politics is the same thing.
Right. So I'm not saying either one is better than the other. It's just that I don't see where religion
if you
beats
argue,
politics.
If you argue that the world, because you did say that you don't see, if you remove religion, how the world would really be any worse off. So you'd have to also make the same argument that we should also remove all government.
Have you met me?
but you know,
I'm not
full anarchy.
How about my
is
roads?
hell.
Yeah, I'm not that guy.
And I think that's actually the best example to prove that wrong, or to at least poke a couple holes in it. Pure anarchism is hell on earth. Look at that Chaz place out, and how long before they started killing people?
Oh yeah, there has to be order.
I mean, it with anarchy, chaos, and just instantly
is that what
hits.
what you're like Oregon? What they're doing there? Is
That was
that what
Seattle.
you're talking about?
That Chaz zone was like Seattle.
Okay.
But yeah, I think Oregon is going on right now too, right?
They had something similar break out. I don't know what it was though.
Sorry.
So, no, you're good. But out of all of this is kind of a segue out of that. But I think that it's important to mention because it's we've been talking about moral compass, which I think is great, but we haven't really talked any about, I guess we have, but the man behind the scenes, what happened to lead us here? In other words, what I'm getting at here is...
How did you pick your path?
No. I picked my path because, like I said earlier, I got freaked out when the Southern Baptists just told me that I was going to burn forever. I was like, no, I'm just going to step away from this.
But like we had talked about earlier, you could easily remove that out because Jesus in the New Testament doesn't mention that shit at all.
Right. So, and like I said, if I was to go over to the Methodist Church, I might be a totally different person today. But my immediate taste that was left in my mouth was...
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. So that's what led me to where I'm at.
But we talked about very low level of spiritual development that, like, I'm not going to break the law because I don't want to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. Not because it's wrong to break the law, just because I don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Yeah. So it's not super effective.
And also people in power who think that people are dumb enough to believe that. You know, sort of like insulting their intelligence a bit, you know.
So what are you trying to say that Southern Baptists have an intelligence issue? And that's why that...
Careful.
And that's why that...
You don't want to be onto something there.
And that's why that tactic works with them.
Trying to use scare we can make this very universal. You know, anybody who's trying to use scare tactics with a more intelligent person is going to say, whatever.
No, see...
You know?
Exactly. That was what I ran into, was that I looked around the room and people that were... Actually, these fear tactics were working on them. When I would ask them questions that contested obvious issues in the Bible, for example, if God is omnipresent, all-seeing, all-knowing, knows what happens in the future, know what happened at the beginning, etc., why would he create a heaven and a hell? If he knows the exact amount of people that are going to wind up in hell, that is a slap in the face to free will, which the Bible also says you have. He said that he made this hell for you to make the decision, yet he knows the final number of people that are going to end up in hell.
Yeah, because if he exists within time, then he knows what happens.
So it eliminates the ideology of free will. Yet it says in the Bible that there's free will. So, of course, I asked about this, and people said, don't question shit, or you'll burn in hell too. And I immediately said, oh, I'm smarter than these people.
Sorry.
Because I've asked this question and they're afraid to give me an answer. So I stepped away from it, for one, because of the fear-based tactics, and for two, because intellectually I realized that they were not to a level to where they could answer a basic philosophical question. So either they didn't know their text well enough, or it's just it is such a contradiction that it falsified the whole thing for me. Well, it made it invalid.
And to maybe challenge that a little bit, I'll look at, instead of being, because we're not insinuating that religious people are not intelligent.
No, I know a ton of people that are far more intelligent than me that are religious. That's not what I'm referring to.
I think their intelligence can be a factor, though, with some people. Just because if you're not able to cognitively process abstractly, you may struggle with it. You just need that concrete black and white. This is what this says. You do it. But I tend to err on the side that it's more of a problem with spiritual development. Okay. And I think the problem would come from the ministers that are teaching. Because like we just said, the Bible doesn't really talk about that. Not the New Testament. Mm-hmm. I guess I could be wrong. Someone will probably end up saying it, but I don't think the Bible really, because I've read Sermon on the Mount a bunch of times. I don't remember Jesus talking about going to hell. And
no, I don't think so.
And he was more preoccupied with the code for morals and how you live than what happens when you die. Mm-hmm. And so my guess would be that, it's kind of like, our coworker used to say, you can only get as good as your therapist, right? Mm-hmm. And if your therapist is a train wreck,
right,
you're not going to get any better than them. Mm-hmm. Well, why wouldn't that apply to your politician or apply to your minister?
Yeah, no, that's good.
So if you have a minister that's garbage, that was what you could see as a generational problem with poor spiritual development.
Or culturally, that town that, they were raised and one beget the next, one preacher beget the next preacher, and then the town, operated under these fear-based things.
The good thing is about the Bible, you don't have to, I know fellowship is a big part of Christianity. Kind of like in Buddhism, you have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the scripture, and the Sangha is the community. And so Christianity's got some very similar stuff to that, because they understand we're social beings and we grow spiritually based on with each other. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a culture, like Nana was saying, that has a low level spiritual development, they're just kind of feeding off each other and they're not growing very well. Mm-hmm. If you took some of those people and you plucked them out of that environment and put them into a environment with a minister who was much more spiritually evolved, you may see them change. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
And you can practice your own religion with the Bible, even if you're an agnostic. You can read Sermon on the Mount and use that as the basis of your moral development. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
Yeah, no. I agree 90%. There's a chunk of it that
the only argument where a religious Christian might argue with me is because those morals and your ability to live that life comes from God, not from it within. Right? We talked about that earlier. Mm-hmm. And so I think in apologetics, a Christian minister who was well versed in their field would say that you're going to fail if you keep trying to look within, because it's got to come from God. And so that's where an agnostic person would struggle.
Well, beyond outside of, like, I meant to switch it a moment ago, but I couldn't figure out the way to explain where I was heading. But rather than moral compass or anything like that, the thing is, I feel like what my current moral compass is probably never going to change. It's pretty settled. Like, the things that I think that are right and the things that I think are wrong, there's probably nothing out there that's, I feel like I've already thought through these things well enough to where I've came to where I'm gonna stand with them. So I don't think there's a whole lot of changing with my moral compass. What I am more interested in, actually, is specifically creationism. I'm not talking about the biblical creationism. I'm talking about you may have heard the podcast not too long ago. Joe Rogan had a
I'm getting like throat clears like blaring in my ear.
Yeah, I need a cough drop here. You may have heard the podcast not too long ago, probably a year, maybe 2 years ago, that he had a probability theory specialist that came on. What the guy talked about for a good chunk of the podcast was the possibility of human beings living in a simulation. If I had to subscribe to something as far as creationism, I would have to subscribe to that. And I would have to subscribe to engineers that created that. Exactly. As
which plays to my theory that we're all energy.
It could it actually
Matrix,
could be.
They energy plug it into your belly.
Energy, or we're all ones and zeros.
This is the crazy thing. When he was talking about he talked very little about the Matrix simulation theory. He talked more about probability theory and how the probability leaned towards that we're all already in a simulation. And the reason why is he made a good point when he said that we're getting better and better at creating technology, right? Nobody can deny that. So we went from Atari to these new video game systems. They're getting more and more intense. Now there's VR goggles, and that's been around for 30 years, and there hasn't been much of a bloom, in my opinion. But the fact that it exists, you give it 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 1,000 years.
You don't even need to give it. You could give it 2 years if all the developers decide to put all their effort into it.
100%. The technology is possible.
The technology's there.
Right.
They're just not. VR is not making the money, so they're not putting in the effort.
Exactly. But at some point, it may. People are becoming more infatuated with games, and actually. And I go back to games because people enjoy games. They get to live out the lives that they don't have, lives that are much more interesting than their current lives.
But isn't that an authentic life?
It is. I never said that it was pure. I never said that it was natural. That's neither here nor there.
But we're arguing whether it's good or not.
No.
Then what does this have to do with moral reasoning?
It doesn't. I said it has to do with creationism.
He did switch it off to creationism.
Yeah. So what they said, though, and what was a good point, was that if we continue developing, if we continue with their technology, then eventually you can enter something that is a simulation and completely become engrossed with it. And you can build a world that's inside of a computer that those things inside the computer are convinced, especially with artificial intelligence, that they do exist. And if that's possible here in 1,000 years, probability would tell us that that's already occurred at some point in the past and that it'll occur again in the future.
Well,
so it makes me wonder, if they built this a long time ago, how many systems down are we, in other words, if that theory is correct? In other words, our engineers that built the system that we live in, they were in a system, so on and so forth, which goes back to that parallel universe paradox. And that would also explain the Fermi Paradox that we run into, which is, why in the hell isn't the universe lighting up with intelligent life? It almost seems like a software program was built for just us.
Well, theoretically, if there was a divine creator that breathed the universe into being, this is a simulation anyway.
Exactly.
Because that would mean God has just programmed things to, because he lives within time itself, right? The fourth dimension. So if Christianity holds water on that level, then that would mean that God has already programmed all this, and we're in a simulation.
Or aliens.
That's a whole different thing.
I think it could be the same.
You think you think? I guess God could be an alien.
Well, I mean, it depends what you're...
I've heard those theories from the crazy Greek dude from Ancient Aliens.
It depends what you're...
Where they mistook gods for actual aliens.
Yeah, I mean, but it depends on what your definition of a god is and what your definition.
I think there's
of an alien
evidence.
is. I think that at the end of the day, you can call either the alien, the All-Father, or God, the engineer. I think that when they refer to the engineers, like on the Prometheus movie, they refer to the engineers that created human beings.
Sure.
What about the engineers that created space and time, what we exist in currently? There's nothing saying that we won't create a system that has its own laws, its own properties, its own physics.
But there's...
The law of probability says that we are probably inside of a simulation now that's part of another simulation.
Aren't there like an infinite number of like galaxies and universes and just an infinite?
And it's just weird that
do we know that for sure?
It's theoretical.
Okay.
What?
That there's
The number of universes that
I don't think that it's... No, I don't believe
I'm sure
it's infinite. It's finite.
It's finite. Sure. We have no idea.
On our plane, on our physical touch plane. You know, if you're talking about
we're talking about things we don't even know we don't know.
Right. That's something different. But as far as stars in the sky, we know, as long as we're following the same physics, that the universe is finite, as we can look at it. But just like radio waves, like we were talking about earlier, the fact that we didn't know that they existed a while back, is there other parallel universes and different things like that exist, and we don't have the technology to be able to measure them.
Or like,
so when you talk about creationism in terms of the Matrix, are you talking about some other entity outside of fleshy humans on Earth creating this programmed world?
Yeah.
Because I think it's pretty fair to say that we know that there's not generations of humans thousands of years ago from Earth that did this.
Correct, yeah. The Earth doesn't... If this theory holds, and I'm not saying it does or not, I'm just saying that this has more evidence to me than any religion does. To me. Because of probability.
Okay.
Because of just the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Because like we were talking about earlier with the multiverse, like I didn't believe in God until I started reading about multiverses, and then I realized a God could exist that lives outside of the three dimensions that we see.
Right.
And so, I mean, that could explain religion too. Even though you could argue that, like we just mentioned, that if there is a grand designer of the galaxy, the universe, it's already a simulation.
Right. Which I think is probably...
So actually, you could, in a way, believe that in your theory and Christianity. And you just believe that God is the programmer.
Exactly. If you were to tell a Southern Baptist preacher that, he would lose his mind.
See, I think it's really silly to limit yourself to not at least thinking about these things, because you grow. You don't have to like believe it.
No, you should entertain it.
Yeah. What are you losing?
Well, and that goes back
Exactly.
That goes back to the problem that Biggie was making with so many atheists, is that very black and white concrete. I know there isn't. But what boggles my mind is you have people like Neil Tyson Grass. Is that right?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Who I find to be an insufferable human being. I mean, he's so fucking obnoxious. I can't handle him.
Hey, yeah.
He's a moron. Like when it comes to particle physics and theoretical physics, he's brilliant. But anything that strays remotely from outside of that, the guy is like a child eating shit in the sandbox, and he talks about all these things that contradict his own science. Like he's talking about, he believes in a multiverse and talks about multiverses, and then says there could never be a God. Like, well, that doesn't even add up.
Right.
And maybe you don't want there to be a God. That's the difference.
Because you want Bill Maher to like you.
You want Bill Maher to like you.
I mean, really, that's where he got his start.
I thought it was
on Bill Maher.
I thought he got his start on, like, the universe or whatever, that physics show that came out. Like,
he was on. I've been
no,
watching.
No, that's Carl Sagan. I've been watching Carl Sagan. See, Carl Sagan.
Oh, that was a New Cosmos.
Well, yeah, he took
redid it.
Yeah, which isn't as good. One thing, Carl Sagan, he's like, if you ask me, do I believe in somebody with a long beard and a robe living in the clouds, I'm going to say no, absolutely not. Do I believe that there is a governing force or a force that governs the laws of this universe? Maybe.
Right. I think that's very safe to say.
I do too.
And I don't think that to go any further and say governs current events. No.
Or possibly it could. Maybe, maybe not.
I guess, but you would have to ask, off what moral compass are they working?
Yeah, well, it would be something that we can't fathom.
And that would go back to the Dewey and the ants.
Yeah, it would be something we can't fathom. And it would be that maybe if the God isn't benevolent, and or there is some grand design that we just, as little ants in the anthill, can't see as he smites us with a magnifying glass.
Yeah, I just can't foresee that any of that. I can't foresee that any of that he has a hand in anything. That if there is an engineer of any sort out there, that it would have a hand in any current events that are going on. In other words, set the program, let the program run. It does its own thing, just like any other program. Now, you've already set physics, laws, etc. But to actually go in there and manipulate the program one piece at a time
seems really far-fetched.
And why would you? What would be the point? Like, why?
Well,
you know?
But when you look at computer science, I mean, it's not like Microsoft creates their operating system and then that's it. They do constant updates. They do constant patches, right? They find little flaws all the time in their programming.
That's true. But that would be like altering the laws of physics because we made a mistake to fix something. But letting the program run and do what it's supposed to do its intended thing, which is to be, in essence, an artificial intelligence system, if you're talking about a software program, a matrix, a simulation, that would be the point of it. It wouldn't be to go in and dabble with things. It would be to allow the program to have free will. To go in there and dabble with things, what would be the point of building the program in the first place? You could just do the outcome and be finished with it. Does that make sense? No?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, these are just questions. I don't know.
Well, the problem is, this is why Buddha said whether or not there is a God or not is superfluous.
And I like that. Yeah.
Because, of course I paraphrased it, because, but...
Because you don't speak Mandarin?
Yeah, well, it's not Mandarin. He wasn't Chinese. He was from...
Was he not?
No, he was from what would have been Nepal. India.
Oh. What?
He was Indian. Didn't you know Buddhism comes from India?
No, I didn't know that.
Interesting.
I know that there was... I'm thinking of like Shiva and stuff when I'm thinking...
Hinduism.
Oh, yeah, that's
Hinduism.
Hinduism and Buddhism all...
They both come from India?
And Jainism, they all come from India.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Huh. I didn't know that Buddhism came from there. I just assumed that it was Hinduism.
Now, Chan is a Chinese form of mindfulness that came from Indian Buddhism and then moved over to Japan and became Zen. I know you've probably heard of Zen Buddhism. And that comes from Chinese, which actually I believe the Bodhidharma No, he was an Indian monk who moved to China.
So what has been the mainstream Chinese religion?
Atheism. Since the culture, since Mao's,
since communism,
since
but prior
Mao's
to that,
Buddhism.
Buddhism? Okay, that's why I was thinking that. Okay.
I'm sure they have a very ancient pagan religion, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But for at least like 2,000 years, 2,200, 2,400 years, it's been...
We didn't get to your beliefs.
I feel like my beliefs can be deduced from the conversation because I've been...
You don't get off, Betty.
I guess we could end on that because we're kind of getting towards our time.
Well, speaking of ending, we can do that, but I was going to ask what everybody's thoughts on the afterlife were.
Oh, yeah. All right.
That would be a good end.
I have said what my beliefs are.
1 or 2 minutes.
I have been saying what my beliefs are off of YouTube this whole time.
What did you not say for 1 or 2 minutes of the program?
I'm a Buddhist.
Did you say what led you there?
I didn't explicitly say that, I suppose. It's complete happenstance. I never liked Christianity, and I didn't really believe in any kind of God or anything, and I'd read a little bit about Buddhism and thought that it seemed pretty cool, like everybody who smokes pot, and by the way,
so tell me more about this Buddhism.
Yeah, and when I started practicing it, I just realized there was a lot of truth in it.
Interesting.
That's all we're gonna get.
That's all we're gonna get. We've been. We can.
We'll circle back.
You know, we'll dive more into it later.
This podcast is ongoing, so I will, figure you out later.
So, are we talking about the end, post end,
post what?
Afterlife.
Yeah. The scariest thing in the whole world to me is to think that it's nothing. That you just turn to worm feed.
You just rot. And we don't, our consciousness is not really a soul, and nothing transmigrates. Your energy just moves off into other particles and gets incorporated into other entities, and there's no consciousness to tie to those particles. Yeah. You just stop existing.
Imagine how nice it must be to be a dog and not worry about things like that.
Or how people project personalities onto lizards. What if we project, the lizard has feelings and emotion. What if we're just one big projection and we don't fucking matter?
Well, ultimately,
so scary.
I would say ultimately we don't matter. In the flow of time in the universe, we are literally just dust particles. Or as Carl Sagan would say, space stuff.
Stardust.
Space stuff.
Space stuff, that's what it was, yeah.
And, maybe Nana's getting all existentially upset over here.
No, it's
no, I get
it. Yeah.
It's just scary.
It is a scary possibility.
Well, it's scary. If you don't believe, we're talking about moral development, if you don't believe in an afterlife, there's a lot of people, and this is kind of a counter to what you were talking about, if there's no heaven and hell, there's a lot of people who will just do even worse things to people. A lot of people. Because who the fuck cares? Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that the world would not be better off without religion. Because even if that is a stupid crime and punishment stage of moral development, it's keeping people from doing even worse, hideous things.
A good chunk of people.
A decent amount. I don't really couldn't put a number on it.
Right, like you said earlier, law is not the most effective tactic, but it's what we've got. It's the same thing with religion. It's not perfect.
Laws as much as they can get away with.
And there's people that don't care about religion or don't believe in it, so therefore they go do wild things. But no, I'm agreeing with you saying that, but it does keep a giant chunk of people from doing immoral shit. So, yeah, I would agree.
Or the worst of the worst in moral shit.
Yeah,
right?
I think
so. Law and religion kind of hold the same function.
Well, I think actually, you need a balance of government and religion.
Yeah,
not necessarily like interwoven like a theocracy, right? But I do think that they really balance each other well.
Here's a question in regards to that. Do you think that every person needs some type of religion?
Yeah.
Or do you think that there's people that
I would say
never need it and they're fine?
Need is a strong word. I need oxygen. Mm-hmm. You know, I think everyone can benefit from it.
Do you need religion or do you need spirituality?
See, to me, spirituality is just your meaning and purpose in the universe.
And could that be enough?
From what I've seen with a lot of people, it's better than nothing. But I'm not seeing that you need some of that dogma. You don't necessarily need like the sing this song, now kneel and say this prayer, now stand again and sing this song, right? Mm-hmm. That's not.
But don't we already inherently have that, whether we know it or not, just by how we're raised and how your mom was raised? But how do you argue?
But see, you're using the context of religion that is rooted in. I mean, we were descended from Puritans,
right,
and Pilgrims, and
so we inherently have it, right?
Culturally. You know, and I think what we're seeing is we are leaving it more. And I don't think things are getting better.
Yeah, because it's hard to imagine a world like 100 years from now and children are completely raised even without a slight
inkling
hint of it.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that that's possible.
I don't think it's possible either. Because
I think that people would,
eventually
even if all the current religions disappeared, they would come up with new ones.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, that's
humans are designed to worship something.
Yeah,
and the problem is if it's not a god, it tends to be themselves.
Well, that's what we got, right? I mean,
we got a lot of that. And or if not a god, a man-driven entity like government, right? People, we have a lot of people who are putting government as their higher power right now, and that's a scary ass thing.
Yeah,
because government is just run by selfish, greedy people.
Exactly.
What about the people that don't like the government and aren't religious?
There are not very many of them.
It's true. They are a rare breed. I think that. So when I was a kid, this was one that I came up with, right? I said, what is the possibility that if you take, just for example, there's a lot of molecules that do this, but if you take DMT or you take acid or you take some of these psychotropics, then you will, one of the things that gets fucked up, allegedly, I don't know, but one of the things that get fucked up is time. You don't know, your mind can't tell the difference between 5 minutes versus an hour. Time kind of doesn't really exist for you internally. It fucks up your clock. So upon death, is there a chance that when you die, hell per se is the how at peace you are with yourself? This is what I kind of thought of as a kid. We have a lot of gray matter in our head that's not really used. Now there is more. Back in the day, they said, what was it, 70% of your brain was dark matter or gray matter that wasn't used for anything, and they've changed that.
Gray matter is the neural soup with all your neurons.
Right, and they've changed that to where they're not saying, oh, it's not 70%.
They used to say we used. I don't know if that's true.
That's what I'm saying. Now they're saying that that's not the case.
We use
the whole brain is used, but there are parts that are darker than other parts that aren't firing, that don't have as much of a use.
Yeah, well, the gray matter thickens the more you use certain parts of the brain. And so you have more neural activity in certain parts that are being used more.
Right, that makes sense. So,
which is why it's really important to learn skills and practice doing things out of your comfort zone.
Well, I'm just wondering how many neuroscientists, and I'm sure all of them have, but I'm wondering if they've looked into when a person is dying, what specific parts of the brain fire as you're dying. And what I'm wondering is there a possibility that there's a part of it that lights up that is releasing a chemical or has the reaction that one of these chemicals would that slow down time for you? And this is the reason that I say that. Hell is eternal. And I'm trying to match up science with ancient...
Yeah, no, I kind of see what you're getting at.
So what I'm saying is there a part of the brain that lights up as you're dying that slows down time for you, and now you're trapped in there and you don't know how long anything is? In other words, it could be 5 minutes or it could be an entire eternity. You don't understand. Your brain doesn't cognitively realize it's non-linear, that the time doesn't exist in that realm. And during that, do you have to deal with all of your decisions that you've made throughout life? Are you at peace with yourself? Because if you're not, and you've done shit that goes directly against your moral compass, stuck in that, reliving those and dealing with your unsettled self would be in essence a hell. But if you've had a great life, you had kids and you were proud of everybody and you've done really good shit and you don't have any regrets, then that would in essence be heaven.
I know
it would be peace.
Eternally.
In your head.
My
Granted,
mother...
30 seconds later, everything's shut down and you're dead, but you're stuck there. Do you see what I'm saying?
But what you're saying is that the concept of heaven and hell would have had to have been derived by somebody who had died and then come back?
No, I'm not.
Because how would you know that's all happening?
He's saying that heaven and hell exist in that time before your brain ceases all activity.
It's completely
But
internal.
who would know?
No one would know.
Who would know to make it heaven or hell?
To write it out.
Right.
To write it into scripture.
Who would,
Nobody
that's what
would.
I'm saying.
But and I see what you're saying, 100%.
There's always people that have near-death experiences.
That's true. But I'm saying on a philosophical level, are we talking deeper than what... In other words, did our ancient philosophers accidentally get this right? Maybe there is heaven and hell, and maybe they don't know it because some person told them. But is it possible that we accidentally got it right? Because that's the closest that I could see to it actually existing. This is something that
I've heard. Tell me if maybe you've heard this, but people that have decided they were going to kill themselves by jumping off a bridge or something like that, right before they have impact, and they survive it. These are the people that survive it. They realize that none of their problems was worth what's about to happen. Have you heard this?
What are you asking?
Yeah, what's the question?
Just that how, whatever realization, is it a spiritual realization? Is it, why would they all of a sudden say, the reason why I wanted to kill myself is now null and void, right before it happened, right before they think they're going to die?
Well, my guess would just be fear of death hits them, and the reality that everything will cease to be in their life right before they splat.
Okay.
And so
Fair enough.
You're just seeing regret in that last moment.
So
that's why you don't jump off a bridge.
You
do something that's immediate. Nice 357.
Does that happen when you die? Then?
Regret?
Something like this?
When my mom used to be a chaplain in the ER, and she told me, this, you'll love this. This is right up the Nana alley. That
I have an alley.
Yeah, I have an alley.
That's what you should call your the Nana alley.
I'll do it. I love it.
Nana's way.
Nana's alley.
Nana's alley. She said that because one of the things chaplains do is they pretty much deal with death in the hospital. Mm-hmm. If you've ever been to a hospital that has chaplains, they don't all have them, but some do. Mm-hmm. And she could tell when walking into a room after people had died, the energy that was in it. And she said sometimes it was almost ominous, scary. Like it would actually chill her. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it was tranquil. Mm-hmm. And people, I do think on some level, kind of like you said, maybe the ancient philosophers accidentally got it right. I think part of religion is trying to interpret the unexplainable, including not just science and nature, and the history of the world and dinosaurs and all that shit, that 6,000-year-old planet. It's not just trying to explain why there's thunder, but also try to explain all these feelings that are very real. Because if you've ever walked into a room and got a bad vibe from something, that's real, right? Whether or not there's like a weird energy and science behind it, I don't know. It might just be intuition.
That falls into the category of things we think as opposed to things we know.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely interpret. It could just be intuitiveness, right? We're just picking up on something that, because I'm sure there's people that could walk into that room my mom did and not pick up on anything. And so I do think that religion has been a tool to try to explain all the unexplainable, no matter how abstract or concrete. And because why is there thunder? Thor.
Obviously, Thor's hammer.
And why is there suffering? Well, because that's how there's growth.
In the past few years, I've have a new theory myself about not everybody who dies wants to die, but there's a lot of people who die that want to die.
Well, here's the funny thing about somebody who is, I wouldn't go as far as say self-actualized. What I would say is somebody who has led a complete life. They're no longer afraid of death. They don't.
What about somebody that's led a miserable life?
Same. They're just done.
Yeah, no fear of death.
I watched
can't
when
get
you were
worse
in
than
the
this.
hospital a couple years ago, maybe it was. I had a client that was dying in the hospital at the same time, and I watched her die. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm whooped." She shook her head. She said, "I'm whooped." She was done.
Yeah, no,
that woman wanted to die.
In my practice, I have lost people. It's inevitable when you work in mental health, right?
Yeah.
And especially when you work with seriously mental ill people. And there are very few times did I say, "Oh man, they had so much potential to change everything around." Some of those people, as horrible as it sounds, like they had gotten to this point. It was beyond just a temporary hopelessness. We're talking about like a long, protracted decades of agony and living in just chronic hell on earth. And my first thought was, well, maybe they have more peace now.
Now, one quick question on that is, you've got somebody with terminal cancer. They're going to die. They've got pancreatic cancer. They've got very short term to live. They can live. They can survive all the way up until the time that they're naturally taken. Or we could end it early, Dr. Kevorkian style. Now, the difference is that versus mental health. Mental health, they could survive indefinitely as long as they keep eating or getting fed through a tube, but they're living in just as much pain as that person with stage 3 cancer. So if Dr. Kevorkian is assisted suicide is okay in one instance, how is it not okay in the other instance? This is just a philosophical question. Or is it okay in either instance? What are y'all's thoughts?
The problem with most suicides, which is why for years I had no problems hospitalizing people for suicidal ideation, is because for most people, suicide is a very permanent solution to a very temporary problem. And it's not based in logic.
Yep.
It's just feeling hopeless in that moment.
Yep.
Most of them statistically are like drunk, so they're impulsive and they're overly emotional. And it's not a logical, well thought out decision.
So we've eliminated the
Which
my
makes
boyfriend broke up with me, I'm going to kill myself people. But what about the other people? That's the ones I'm referring to.
The ones I'm talking about.
Those don't tell you they're going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
They just
Right,
do it.
because they mean to.
Yeah.
The ones that
out.
I've had in my practice have like decades of just agony.
Right, but I'm referring to, as a civilization, would it be wrong to, as a culture, would it be wrong to end their suffering if we saw that it was continual and
What
it wasn't
kind
going
of
to get
suffering?
fixed? Well, that's what I was referring to.
Oh, if it's mental health or...
mental health,
It depends,
or
though.
if it's...
I don't.
Is it okay to let them remain crazy for 25 years and just live in pure hell inside their head? Is that okay? Should we do that?
I just don't think that it's our place to do that. I think if someone's going to do that, they're going to do it. Unless they have physiologically lost the ability to do it.
What if they ask you?
Like multiple sclerosis or something, like they can't physically pick up a gun and end
Right.
their life.
Well, what if the person is in a psych ward?
Well, then they're probably not in the right frame of mind to where I would
to make a
rational decision.
But you know that they're suffering.
Well, yeah,
And
but
you know that
everybody suffers, though.
Yeah.
To that extent?
I don't know. A lot of
It
people
depends.
suffer in a lot of ways.
You can see if they're shitting on themselves and wiping
Is
feces and seeing other people that aren't
Well,
there.
that's what the...
And we try to treat them, but 10 years
these
later, they're still not better.
institutions were for, right?
Is it okay to let them live in that type of filth and that type of misery?
Is that because...
For that period of time? That's what I'm asking.
Is that because that they're just inherently miserable and should be allowed to die? Or is that because they just don't have the proper coping skills to deal with suffering that most people experience?
Or,
I'm
people
talking
who
about,
lack capacity.
I'm talking about the people that you can't give coping skills to.
People who lack capacity.
Yes.
Someone who's got like an IQ of like 60.
Exactly, but they're miserable too. It's not, I've got the low IQ and I'm happy. I'm not talking about Forrest Gump here. I'm talking about someone who's
You're talking
fucked.
about somebody that's
I'm going to tell you why I don't think we should. Because the last thing, this is going to be, it's probably something you can resonate with. The last thing on earth we need is laws and politicians getting involved in death.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the last. That's a scary road once you start moving down. That's like death panels and death councils and
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games.
Should it be left up to any individual if they lack
It should be up to the individual.
If they can't make the decision and the government's not making the decision, should the immediate family be able to make the decision?
No, if they don't have the capacity to make their own decision, I think it should be nature should take its course.
Yeah. I always thought that, like,
So
if I was sick in a
you would be
hospital,
comfortable with their suffering for a long period of time?
I can't control that.
I'm aware. I'm not arguing for it. I'm just asking.
Nobody except a psychopath
know.
wants people to suffer.
and put yourself in their shoes too. What like I always thought if I was like in a hospital, sick and suffering, dying, and they want to pump me up with a bunch of fucking drugs and just keep me sedated and miserable. I'm not gonna want to stay there.
But you won't be sedated. You won't be miserable. You'll be sedated.
But who wants to? I mean, I guess that goes. Do you have a right to decide if I want to die in this hospital?
I think people have the only right to decide their life like that. The last thing I want is government being able to say,
agreed, euthanize
that somebody should be euthanized.
Yeah. No, I
which
agree
is what we're talking about. This became the uncomfortable conversation, right?
Right.
This is we're moving into euthanasia. I mean, abortion is a type of euthanasia.
Okay, so
and I think it's absolutely abhorrent morally.
The next question that kind of stems off this is, rather than government being able to euthanize people, should they have the option to say, "I want to die now"? Dr. Kevorkian case. Was it right or was it wrong to persecute
I didn't have
him?
a problem with Dr. Kevorkian, but I didn't, honestly, I guess my personal judgment would, because I'm going to want to know what were these people's state of mind.
What was the case?
And did he capitalize?
When he went to prison,
the capitalization's an issue, for sure.
No, when he went to prison, what was, I know I'm trying to think, I think I was in college. when he went to prison. What was the details around that case? Was it someone who wasn't terminal?
No, I think it was the capitalization, wasn't it? The fact that he was doing it was morally questionable, and then the fact that he was capitalizing off of it is what I believe he ended up going to jail for, was making money off death.
I think Biggie's right. I don't think that he...
Yeah, I don't think he ever killed anybody that wasn't
terminal.
Yeah, I think it was all terminal, which is what made it a big case, because people were like, these are terminal people. They were going to die regardless. You're going to let them suffer.
Regardless. You could almost argue... Because
I personally think that, and this is my personal thoughts on it, that's why I ask y'all's, is that what he did was perfectly fine. The capitalization would be the only questionable thing.
Well, you got to get paid for something.
You do have to get paid, but how much money are you making, and should that be something that the government pays for rather than individual people? So basically,
what...
I don't know.
Did they come to him, or did they...
So basically, the people dying don't give a shit about their wealth. He was probably getting... sued by the family who wanted to inherit their wealth.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because people are just awesome like that.
It's a good way to put it.
I don't have a terrible problem with... I don't remember at the time having an issue
because that was like
him.
98 or something, wasn't it? When you went to prison.
It was like 18. Yeah, I think I thought, well, if they want to die. But, me, now I would just question... Now that I know a lot more about mental health and... emotional people in a state like Callie was describing, people who wanted to commit suicide in the moment, and then about 12 hours later, 24 hours later, oh, okay.
And most people, which would drive me insane, because hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, don't want to take people who are intoxicated because once they sober up, they're fine. I'm like, well, so we can't just let them go home?
Yeah, I run into that a lot.
I'm like, we can't just let them go home, because the whole point is we're worried that they're going to kill themselves while they're drunk. And even if that is the primary problem at the moment for why they're impulsive and want to die, that's kind of doesn't matter, does it?
And I run into that same issue when we go into somebody's house and find them like not overdosed to the point where they're blue, but so high that at any point they could overdose. And then they'll call me and be like, what do you want to do about this? I'm like, well, I can't bring him to my house, guys. I mean, what do you want me to do? Come and sit with him until the morning? Can you not take him to a hospital or put him in a drunk tank and monitor it? Nothing? And they're like, well, he hasn't done anything illegal, so we can't arrest him. And he's not suffering from an illness. A hospital's not going to take him. I'm like,
this is why...
But he could die at any second. You don't know how much of that drug is actually just in his veins, ready to hit his head or hit his heart. And,
yeah, that's why you don't be friends with John Travolta. He would just drive his car right up into your yard. Well, I think we should probably start unpacking this and kind of closing up. And does anyone have any final thoughts they want to add? We'll be talking about this here and there.
Stay tuned for the evolution of coconuts.
Oh, okay.
I'm interested for you to start putting that into a book.
Putting it into a book?
It could be
coconut theory?
Coconut spirituality.
Yes. No, because there'll be too many people to...
On Nana's Island.
No, because then people are going to whop me upside my head with reality. Like, you guys did. Hey, we lost that whole coconut thing, but that's all right.
We'll get back to it. We'll circle around coconuts.
I will give it an effort to see, if anything I said holds weight. Anything.
Well, it's like we were talking about earlier, Everything we talk about right now may not be what we think. I know you did kind of say that I feel like my moral compass is fixed, but you can say that with authority for the present moment, but that's it.
That's true. Yeah. I never guaranteed
like
it
your
was.
views
I just feel like
your views on abortion may change after you have a child born. Right. You never know.
Yeah. Well, they say we change like every 7 years anyway, like as people.
I know our taste buds change every 7 years.
Well, I think
I still don't like liver though.
The 7 year thing. I think that's when all your cells.
That's where you processed toxins in your body. It can't be good for you.
It's kind of like all the vitamins.
You can get a lot of vitamins from a lot of places, but don't get
You
it.
just don't want to eat your liver.
Don't get it from the part of the body that filters toxins.
You just don't want to eat your
When
liver.
I field strip a deer, it's the first thing I go for. So, no, what were we just talking about right before that?
Oh, man.
Oh, I don't.
Right before you mentioned the
I
liver.
lost it.
Fuck, no, it was something good.
How we change every 7 years?
Oh, yeah, how we change every
Yeah.
7 years. I'm pretty sure that the 7-year thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that every cell is replaced in your body once every 7 years, so technically you're a new human being? That kind of goes back to that old philosophical principle of if you replace every plank on the ship, is it still the original ship?
No, oh, yeah. Yeah, I know that. That's
I
a
like
good
that
one.
Yeah, it is a good one. So, but changing as a person, cellular reconstruction wise, I think
And
is
by the way, the answer would be no. It's a facsimile of the original ship.
a facsimile. I like that. But I think though that when a person, and I've seen this for myself, when a person hits their mid-20s to early 30s, it seems like they're as cognitively developed as they're going to get. Like, I have not seen that not hold true. In almost every circumstance that I've seen, you can be an entirely different person at 20 and 30. But I rarely see an entirely different person at 35 to 50. Does that make sense?
Oh, I do all day long.
I don't. Where? I mean, other than
In
outside
therapy?
of like substance abuse or some shit like that. Outside of
why,
that,
why would that not count?
well, that's a specific ailment that they're suffering from. I'm saying healthy people that don't deal with that are just normal people that never had an alcohol issue.
Are you when you say cognitively, do you just mean like their intelligence?
I
And
don't
their
see a
ability
person
to
that's
reason?
a Democrat at 35 becoming a Republican at 50 or vice versa.
Oh
if
no,
that's going to
we've seen.
change,
I've
that's
seen
20 to 40.
No, hell no. I've seen that happen a lot just in 2020. So many people that
I was
changed.
when
Really?
I met
I've seen people
Callie.
just buckle down.
Oh no,
Man,
no,
I
I've
would
seen-
argue about it. Like I'm like, you're wrong, buddy.
No.
And
I've seen people change all day long, all day long.
Then what are they referring to that in your mid-20s, early 30s, you...
I think they mean like your actual cognitive development, like in your brain. Even though we've actually proven that's not true too. Your brain is constantly growing new neurons and increasing gray matter or decreasing.
I feel
Well,
like
they are
everybody that
saying-
I've met, when I meet a person that's 30, when I meet them again 10 years later, they change ideology on a couple things, but overall they're still the same person.
There's a lot of people
But when I meet
that
20 to 40, I meet two totally different fucking people.
there's a lot of
well,
people
they say
that
your
are.
frontal lobe doesn't like. More research has come out that your frontal lobe doesn't actually stop developing until you're more like 30.
Yeah.
So
And
Maybe that's what I'm referring to. I just read that, and then I started looking at people, and I was like,
I mean, people
Yeah.
figure out, kind of we talked about the other week with confidence and just getting older and knowing who you are. I mean, people, maybe what you're just seeing is people are just more stuck in their ways. But I've been
Yeah.
seeing a lot of people changing, and I see people in religion changing all the time. And not just before 30. And I don't know if I really have anything else more to say about that.
I feel like you did a me when I get stuck. Okay. Nice.
So
That's all I have to say about that.
that's all I gotta say about that.
Jenny.
John High.
we've put a nice bow on it. Doctor?
So what are we going to end with? We need to end with something other than liver.
I mean, coconut evolution, man.
Coconut evolution, man.
Fire and brimstone, man.
Fire, brimstone, coconuts. Yeah, that's all right.
Cue the music.
Cue the music. Thanks for listening to the Biggie Callie Show. It's been a crazy ride, and Antenna's here, you know. So come on back next week and give us a friendly ear. We'll have ourselves a merry time and drink American beer.